I normally don't do this, but I would like to introduce this video with a very heavy content warning, considering this may reach a broader audience and not just for the sake of entertainment or making fun of lolicons, so to say. There will be discussions of CSA, SA, pedophilia, lolicon, and shotacon. If any of these subjects disgust you to the point where you cannot watch, I would advise clicking off the video now. With that out of the way, let's start. So, I've made the videos, I've pissed off a lot of degenerates, and they're demanding answers. I didn't really care to explain my stance before or try to dissect the arguments presented by these individuals because just the fact that you needed an authority figure saying that something is technically not illegal or studies to justify your attraction to childlike features is enough to completely disregard your opinion. It is within my belief that any media that is sexualizing minors or people that are attracted to childlike features have no reason to be justified. These people need help, and there is no reason to enable them. This is my opinion. A lot of people share this opinion, but many technicalities cause it to be just that. An opinion. Those videos were never supposed to be anything more than that, and despite saying as such, they acted as though it was supposed to be an analytical hit piece on anime fans for spreading illegal material, quote unquote. If you're curious, it wasn't, and I've tried to make that very clear. Fact of the matter is that Loli is technically legal as it was deemed unconstitutional to restrict artistic freedom. My opinion is that many, not all, lolicons are pedophiles. My goal with this video is to give you an explanation for this opinion and hopefully sway yours over to this side. Even if you don't agree that it's pedophilic in nature, I do want to present the argument that this form of media should not exist, or at very least has no reason to outside of complete degeneracy. This is a community built on harassment, projection, and hypocrisy for the sake of defending material so vile that it is illegal in many developed countries and only isn't explicitly considered child porn in the United States because of a loophole. I'm making this video in such a format because there have been several requests by non-lolicons to provide an analysis outside of reactionary or opinionated content. I respect the opinions of those that don't sexualize minors, so I will oblige. Going forward, I need to clarify some things and make a few disclaimers to set up proper context for this discussion. The term pedophile refers to those who are sexually attracted to children or childlike features. I'm not calling these people child predators, I'm not calling them sex offenders, or implying that they are doing anything illegal. Unfortunately, it isn't illegal to be a pedophile, it's only illegal to act on those urges. The specific group of lolicons that I'm talking about, and the largest apparent group of them, is the ones that view and distribute sexually explicit depictions of children ages 12 and under and proudly announce their love for the material. I'm not talking about quote-unquote petite women, as the bodily features of many of these depictions more closely resemble that of a prepubescent child than a short woman, and not even by a margin. The material depicts children that are barely old enough to walk, performing unknowing sexual acts. More often than not, rape is also a part of these depictions, frequently showing the children in obvious distress. Other features to note would be more stubby limbs, amongst other features only apparent in those going through early developmental stages, lack of an hourglass shape and figure, facial expressions that convey a lack of understanding and innocence. Those are among a few key features that, apart from the stylized faces, make this art only comparable to minors. Keep in mind that stylization is meant to give emphasis to the childlike features. I also don't believe that these people are traditional pedophiles, that being someone who has a natural attraction to children. I believe lolicons are porn addicts who went down a rabbit hole looking for the next best thing to get off to until they reached the very, very bottom of the barrel in terms of degeneracy. I think that these people can change back to the way that they were, maybe through therapy or whatever, but they are choosing to be a pedophile because they essentially don't want to go through a porn detox. Speaking directly to those of you that are lolicons, if you do not want to be called a pedophile, then you have to change, not us. You may find it redundant to point out these things, as most of you have the mental capacity to infer context, but I have to add these, otherwise everything presented will be discredited on a miswording or communication error, because obviously that's more important than subject matter and morals involved. I'm going to start by presenting my argument, and then I will play devil's advocate at every possible opportunity using arguments made by this group, followed up by my own counter-argument. Let's start as such. Lolicons are pedophiles. The first argument that you might hear is that loli are petite women and not comparable to children, therefore it is not comparable to pedophilia. I've already distinguished the specific group of loli that I'm presenting in my argument, that being material that looks explicitly like children. I'm going to present to you a silhouette of a short adult woman. Now here's one of a child. Even under the circumstance where you argued that the short woman would have less body fat, smaller proportion in the tits and ass, they are far from comparable. I acknowledge once again that there is a portion of Loli that is petite women that you could argue that they're overage, and even though this category is also degenerative, and I personally think that they all look like young teenagers, I won't call the people that get off to this category pedophiles. They would probably follow up calling this comparison hyperbolic, which I've noticed downplaying the nature of this material in the public eye is common. However, if you don't believe me, go to Twitter and see for yourself. This is not an exaggeration on the comparison of features. It's also important to point out that many members of this community straight up say that their attraction is specifically to these younger ages and don't even try to deny the obvious depiction of a younger age. They would then follow up with a statement somewhere along the lines of, "It looks nothing like a child. Obviously, by looking at the face, you can see that no child looks like that in real life," usually on the basis of a slightly larger head and bug eyes. I would like to point out that larger heads and eyes are features of children typically, and I would like to argue that the stylization is in place to put emphasis on these features. This not only does not distinguish them from real children, it puts more focus on the fact that it is trying to depict a small child as opposed to a petite woman. Yes, these features are apparent across all of anime, but is undeniably exacerbated on Lolicon. I've linked below a tutorial that shows how to represent age in anime, in which the segment on young girls specifically shows the features to make the drawing appear more childlike, all of which are present in Loli. Another one I've linked shows the adjustments of proportion to show age. Almost all of Loli falls into these three categories. This is explicitly described as children's proportions. This is also reinforced by the fact that many members of the community will straight up tell you that these characters are underage and that they're attracted to that fact. Once again, now that we've established that these drawings are childlike and that's the basis of the attraction to these characters, it is safe to restate my argument that lolicons are pedophiles. However, we aren't even halfway through the arguments yet. Once you manage to illustrate the fact that this media is pedophilic, they'll probably point out that it is not real and no children were harmed, so it is okay. My issue with the existence of this material is that it allows people to pursue and justify their attraction to minors. I don't believe that Loli hurts children directly. I believe it hurts the consumer. Porn consumption has been shown to increase both non-sexual and sexual aggression, study linked below, and to say that these people are porn addicts would be an understatement, as almost every aspect of their online presence can be correlated to porn, usually lolly porn. I think it's apparent nowadays how detrimental porn addiction can be for most people, and it shouldn't be too hard for you to find videos on why that is on YouTube, so I'm not going to really bother linking anything. Since Loli is a depiction of children and most consumers acknowledge that they won't find anyone with their body type to date legally, it most likely has various unknown impacts on their life. I would speculate that their perception of people, children specifically, relationships, and so on, would be impacted. The only way to gratify themselves sexually in a real-life scenario would be through age play, childlike sex dolls, or committing an offense against a minor. While I believe that age play is degenerative, it is between consenting adults. However, the chance that they'll find a partner who will participate in that is low, meaning the chances for the other options are higher. Not high, mind you. Most of them will likely just jerk off in their room for all of eternity, but we can't just brush past the fact that these people might eventually seek out other options if left to degenerate even more. Now, I said in previous videos that sources said exposure to Loli increases your chance of offending because I heard it word of mouth. And I gotta say it, I couldn't find that study. I know that the lolicons are pumping the air right now and are gonna run off with their imaginary W, but for the rest of you guys, I'd like to just point out the lack of research on this topic in general. And the research that I could find was surrounding Japan and was on CSA victims using it to cope with trauma. I must point out that we do have evidence that says porn can make you more sexually aggressive, and that people who have fetishes and whatnot are far more likely to pursue those sexual actions in real life, at least stated by this medical professional that I happened to find in a thread while looking for these sources. But even if we don't have the sources to give us an explicit answer, we do have the ability to infer from these two facts that at very least, Loli can only cause harm, even if it is only to the consumer. This at very least raises a major red flag, and as the saying goes, hurt people hurt people. Okay, but it's not illegal. True, it's not illegal, but neither is pedophilia. Pedophilia is only illegal when acted upon, but we don't really like pedophiles regardless. Pedophiles can legally use their imagination to get off to their fantasy, but do we think that's okay? Most would say no, especially when you consider that there is treatment, such as medication that kills your libido, and that you can get this treatment without breaking the law. They like to say that their critics can't tell fantasy from reality, but we already treat pedophiles' fantasies to keep them from making it a reality, if that tells you anything. Also, we know from a source listed down below that Lolicon is used by the majority of self-identifying pedophiles, which I believe has created an argument that you should just let the pedophiles use this material to cope so then they don't hurt kids. But we already have treatment available that doesn't require any sexualization of minors, depiction or not. We don't need it as a solution because we already have solutions. Not to mention, there isn't a 0% chance of Loli reaching somebody who has never thought about it, but is now attracted to it. The next argument that might be presented might sound like, but if they don't have anything to satisfy themselves with, they might just take it out on children, and they don't want to get help because of the stigma surrounding pedophiles. Those who are going to commit offenses are just bad people. They'll probably use the social stigma argument after they get caught, but fact of the matter is that anybody that cares about children is not going to sexually assault them because they are aware of the fact that they can get help discreetly and will never have to deal with the social stigma. If they are concerned about the stigma, they'll get help. No one is going to be so sexually frustrated that they unwillingly take it out on a child. If they do, it was premeditated and they acknowledged what they were doing. Unrelated, but it kind of sounds like blackmail. It's like, oh yeah, if you take away our lolly, we're gonna rape your kids. Not my fault though. You were the one that pushed me over the edge. Like, oh my god. I did some more research, and in fact, this is a legal gray area because under federal law in section 1466A, title 18, lolly is classified as child porn as it explicitly states that cartoons are included in that category. However, it is very easy to dodge prosecution because of the segment where it specifies that if it possesses artistic value, it's fine. No matter if it does or not, this is a very easy argument for a lawyer to make because artistic value is so subjective, even though we all know that the sole existence of lolly is fat material for these degenerates. It is classified as child porn if you follow the law and take into consideration common sense. But the loophole is there, so lolicons like to say that it is legal. They have a point in the sense that they will probably not be prosecuted under technicalities in their favor, but no, it is illegal. They will tell you that it is not CP because it is not illegal, which is false. It is still CP, but you can legally get away with obtaining it and distributing it under the guise of artistic purposes. So whether or not it can be gotten away with, it is still child porn. More so, almost always, the intent of the author or artist of this material is to fetishize the characters, making it inherently illegal. The only catch is that you can lie about your intent, thus changing the legality. Lolly is also explicitly illegal in a few states, most falling into that gray area, with the only state where it's explicitly legal being California. Go figure. The reason why I'm not reporting it to the police is that I can do more on the internet to spread awareness about this vile community than I'd be able to in real life. Also, as the court of law might not care about your consumption of this material because of its quick dismissal, your place of employment might. I know this, and I know that's why you refuse to show your face online. It's also why I made this post that successfully managed to bait a handful of people into showing their face. Next argument, you're watering down the word pedophile. I realize that we use the word pedophile to describe child predators or people who commit crimes against children, but the definition is only about attraction. I would argue that this is the perfect context to use this term after reviewing the material that these individuals are so obsessed with. I would even say that we gas the term up too much, as the initial response to it is people visualizing an offender. We have words like sex offender, child predator, and molester to describe these people, but we choose to use pedophile because they're also pedophiles and it's much easier to say. I don't think that this is a hyperbolic context to use this term in. Maybe if you called all anime fans pedophiles, yes, but I've made it very clear as to what material I would consider to be pedophilic. If you do not want to be associated with the term, stop looking at pedophilic material. It's honestly as simple as that. What they will bring up next is the argument that because you're spending time being repulsed by hand-drawn child porn, that you don't actually care about child victims, because if you did, you'd focus on that instead. I can hate pedophiles, child predators, and be sympathetic towards victims at the same time. I don't have the knowledge to expose pedophiles. I tried that once with somebody, but I can never get the guy's information, and all of my efforts were futile. I don't have money to donate to victims, and I don't have time to do nonprofit work. At the end of the day, I'll try to do something something good, but if I make no money from it, I can't do anything. I can make money from this and spread awareness to potentially harmful degenerative things. It's about what's within my power to do at the moment and not what I want to do to help. I'm going to make videos regardless. Whether it helps people or not isn't my main concern. This isn't me trying to help children, as I've already acknowledged that Loli doesn't directly harm them. This is me trying to get the degenerates who consume it to get help or have somebody have them get help because the media is harming them. These Lolicons are right for not wanting to be called pedophiles, but the way to not be called a pedophile isn't to redefine the term, it's to stop consuming pedophilic material. I believe the existence of Loli is watering down the term pedophile because it's very slowly normalizing pedophilic material. Pedophilic material, media, and people should not be ignored, even if it's not comparable to the worst that wear the label. Just because it exists in a lesser degree does not mean that we should adjust the stigma for those people. Hopefully, the jarring nature of the word will help people acknowledge the reality of the media that they consume and either stay away from it or seek professional help. Furthermore, my previous point on the definitions is further proven through the paper Child Molesters, a Behavioral Analysis on pages 35 through 37, where the author clearly defines what a pedophile is and also compares it to child molesters in a separate definition. You can find the link down below. The "it's not real and doesn't represent anything in real life" argument falls flat on its face when you realize that they're constantly trying to tell you that these images depict previously mentioned petite women, and will go so far as to say that you're demeaning, shaming, or otherwise dehumanizing real-life short women. Now that they've inadvertently acknowledged that this is an attraction that plays into real life, we can now compare the previous analysis of exclusively childlike features and say that even if they aren't looking for children in real life, they're looking for women with exclusively childlike features, the pre-developmental kind, which are only found in adults with genetic defects and are so rare that at best this is an age kink. Also, the concept that you're shaming somebody for having a body type is absolutely true, especially since this is the body type. I think most people would shame your preference of body type if it looked like a child. Next is that the actual age of the character is not what it looks like. As displayed here, a character that I showed as an example in a previous video was not 5 as I originally thought, but 12. I would like this time to say that I still think that the character looks 5 years old and that 12 is still far below the age of consent. I would like to follow up that this person also posted rape porn of this 12-year-old character shortly after. Credit to Mason on Discord for these screenshots. Now let's hit the "oh yeah, look over here" arguments. You're the only one that thinks it looks like a child. You're the creep here. I'm not sure if this is denial or just a deflection tactic to just avoid the obvious problem here, but the only people who don't think that it looks like a child or say that they don't think that it looks like a child are the ones consuming the material. I think I've covered the topic of why it looks like a child enough. We should instead just acknowledge that this is a fail-safe for them to avoid any repercussions, usually followed up with the "it's just a fantasy, but if it isn't, it's just petite woman." With the sources I've linked, combined with common sense, most of you will be able to tell right away that the only thing this material translates into the real world is children usually aged 5 to 12. It's not hard to tell the differences, but this group will try its best to gaslight you into thinking otherwise. When I unfortunately happen upon this material, I recognize it as childlike because of pattern recognition, and I'm filled with disgust. The acknowledgement of something's existence does not equate to me condoning it, liking it, or being sexually attracted to it. If that were the case, everyone would be trying to fuck everything, but we don't. Most of us have mental barriers when it comes to concepts such as that. Most of us. I'm almost certain that all of these people acknowledge that this is pedophilic in nature and just hide behind these statements for safety. This ties in perfectly with a similar argument that they make, which involves projection. They say things like, the people who are most verbally opposed to us usually have the most skeletons in their closet. They have this narrative that anyone who criticizes them is a quote-unquote real pedophile, which I wholeheartedly believe to be a silencing tactic, as those who are critical of pedophilia are going to be the ones who would want to avoid ever hearing that as an accusation at any cost. I've seen countless comments from people on Twitter saying how it's only a matter of time before I get outed as a pedophile. In most cases, people who interact with this community quickly become exhausted with the mental gymnastics that these degenerates run you through and give up on trying to argue with the same handful of points thrown at them over and over and over on loop. Their tactics oftentimes work, but I'm wholeheartedly confident in the fact that I have nothing to hide. Maybe a few embarrassing things, but nothing on this level. Anyone that knows me knows how critical I've always been on this topic and knows that I'm critical even of pedophilic jokes that are simply edgy. There are even a lot of old Eminem songs that I can't even listen to because of the subject matter and graphic detail. I don't care about a lot of topics that I cover, and I'll say that because I make videos to make videos, not to talk about drama. But I absolutely, vehemently despise anything pedophilic to the point where I am critical of a good portion of pornographic material in general just because of the sexualization of things like barely legal and incest dynamics. Even though my own limits and preferences exist, I don't hold it against most people who consume the vast majority of porn, but I draw a very clear line when it comes to anything explicitly pedophilic. To deny that Loli is pedophilic in nature is to deny that the sky is blue, and I'm not going to say nothing when these degenerates are running around free, getting their kicks out of the fact that I can't legally do anything substantial about it. I want to spread awareness to decrease the acceptance of degenerative pedophilic material, and I know I can, even if it's just to a couple thousand people. Also, I'm just pointing out that this material is pedophilic. I'm trying to demonize the consumption of the material, not any specific individual. I give a clear door out. Stop consuming this material, you won't be considered a pedophile. These people are the ones telling me that I, as an individual, am creepy, that I am hiding something, that I am a pedophile based solely on my criticism of them. If anybody is projecting, it is you guys. My accusations are not baseless, yours are. They might point out after this that I have shown quote-unquote what I consider to be CP in my videos and thumbnails, that being safe for work images of Loli to give context to the audience. Someone specifically said, "What the hell is a safe for work version of child porn?" Which in and of itself is such a brain-dead statement that I shouldn't even have to respond, but for the sake of the video I will elaborate. Take the phrase child porn and remove the adjacent word porn from it. What do you get? Child. That's right. Pictures of children with their clothes on and not in sexual scenarios is not child porn. Get it? Good. Children have a reason to exist in media, and I'm completely fine with them existing in media. What I have an issue with is when they get sexually assaulted and explicitly raped for the sole purpose of one's sexual gratification or existing in any context solely for the sake of one's sexual gratification. This is not rocket science. I would also like to share with you something that Brother Near 2.0 pointed out to me, that in a specific anime named Berserk, there is depictions of sexual exploitation of children, but it's portrayed as a terrible event. The intent of the author is extremely important, as many people believe that terrible things should exist in media, but should stay just that. Terrible. Unfortunately, the intent of all not safe for work Loli artists is fetishization and sexual gratification. There is no reason to fetishize these vile acts. Also, for the record, I have not saved any of this explicit material. I've screenshotted tweets containing it, but it was heavily censored or cropped off with the snipping tool before it was even saved, and I fully intend to remove even the censored versions from my hard drive as soon as they serve their purpose as context. You're fine with violence in video games, so you should be fine with Loli. Basically, stating that video games would cause people to murder if Loli caused people to offend. On paper, this is their best argument until you understand the chemical process behind the acts of sexual gratification and murder. Sexual arousal releases a cocktail of addictive chemicals such as dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin. This is the same for self-pleasure and actual physical intimacy. Video games, which allow you to kill, release dopamine. Killing in real life, however, just dumps a shit ton of adrenaline on most people, and most people recognize that killing in real life will not give you the same satisfactory response that you get from Call of Duty. We also understand that sexual gratification is essentially the same in self-pleasure as it is in intercourse, with intercourse being much better for most people. It is safe to infer that most people will seek out sexual intercourse at some point based on what they gratify themselves to, and that most people will not look to kill another person simply based off of media. Did I need to explain this to most people? No. They like to point out that there's a difference between fantasy and reality, but also fail to acknowledge that certain fantasies, especially sexual, have a huge impact on your reality. Now, forgive me if I butcher this word, but I don't really give a shit. They may bring up shadophilia, which is basically the attraction to cartoon or animated characters. I can't, however, find any instances of it being actually mentioned by medical professionals, and outside of blog posts, a one-sentence Wikipedia page, and an Urban Dictionary definition, I think it's safe to say that this is not a medical term, but a self-made diagnosis made for the sole purpose of cope. I don't believe that this has any bearing on the overarching argument. I did find similar terms, fictophilia and tunophilia, which neither are recognized by the World Health Organization or DSM-5. Pedophilia is, though. I will probably add chapters to this video for each argument, so if you feel the need to bring up any previously mentioned argument as a rebuttal to any point made, please refer back to the chapter and play this video like a choose-your-own-adventure book until you get bored. Bad faith. This is the best faith argument you will probably ever get that isn't just acceptance of your ideas and paraphilia. Censorship. Your community actively tries to shut down, harass, and threaten to dox those that criticize you or disagree with you, going as far to make privacy complaints and threats to sue small creators that used publicly available images of your members in a video within guidelines. Shout out to Loli, by the way. Go follow his channel. You witch hunt your opposition and do anything in your power to keep people from talking about the degeneracy that takes place within your community. You are the absolute last group that deserves a stance on censorship. Clout chasing. There's a narrative that the only people that cover this topic are clout chasers. To put simply, this is another tactic of suppression of criticism. The vast majority of people feel strongly about this topic and would talk about it to condemn it without the promise of views or likes. I covered the topic purely because it was in my immediate peripheral. I make videos on anything that I feel I want to or can discuss. No one sole topic is covered purely because I want people to think I'm cool. If I have something to say, I will say it. CSA survivors in the community will vouch for the existence of Loli. CSA survivors are shown to use depicted and real CP as a coping mechanism and are statistically more likely to go on to be an offender themselves. This is not a good metric to base an argument off of on this subject. As victims should not be silenced, there are equal accounts of CSA survivors who feel the opposite. I've linked below a Tumblr thread with several testaments of CSA survivors who are vehemently against this material. This Wikipedia page which states that Loli is not illegal in Japan. It's also used for the argument of the United States as well, which isn't relevant. However, I'd like to point out that Japan ruled a lack of existence linking fiction and crime, but I also want to point out that CSA rates are so low in Japan because the majority of what we consider to be CSA here is legal there. The age of consent is so low in Japan that the majority of what would be considered sexual assault cases are simply legal and not reported on. And also the use of what is legal in another country is completely irrelevant just to start with. No one should have needed to piece this together. Most people understand the vile pedophilic nature of Loli. Oh, also, shota applies. I almost forgot to say that. However, due to the toxic nature of the Lolicon community and their arguments, it was only a matter of time before somebody stepped up to fulfill the request out of spite. Even if you do go forward and you don't want to call these people pedophiles, I hope that you now understand how degenerate they are regardless. Do not let them gaslight you into thinking you're the freak for being repulsed by their vile behavior. If you need this video or any of the sources to tell you that this is a disgusting, pedophilic, degenerative community, then you probably have some underlying issues. These people revel in cognitive dissonance and morally reprehensible rationalization. Next time I make an opinionated video, just know that it's not because I don't have anything substantial to back up how I feel, it's because I want to make those videos. Special thanks to Mason via Discord and Brother Near 2.0 for giving me a few ideas. Anyway, if you don't like children, depictions of children, childlike features, or fantasize about children, leave a like. If you're a pedophile, be sure to leave a dislike and a comment that nobody will read. To my normal viewers, I apologize for the lack of entertainment value here. We'll get back on schedule soon enough though. Stay hydrated, my fags and females, and until next time, I'm signing out.